everyone as well. Oh, we're almost there. Did you keep subscribing or what? Did you just like try it? Like the food subscription thing? It's so much.
However, I'm definitely recommend trying them. See what you like.
But you are live. There are some people watching currently.
Everyone.
Sound off. So you're not hearing yourself. Just want to be able to get it on my phone so I can leave you a comment and make sure everything's going. Give me just one more second. Please. And if you would ever forget, it's not a big deal. Yeah. He's on top of it. Perfect. Showed up right over there. You are all set. Really wish that I could hear. Never had a problem with it picking up your sound before, except for noises. But I'm running to dinner. I want to say good evening and get a shout out to those of you who are already tuning in this evening. We will be having a program on plant folklore. My name is Steph Morissette, and it's my pleasure to bring this program to you this evening. So we'll be getting started here in about 6 minutes or so. This program was very interesting for me to put together because it combined a lot of naturalist information that I've picked up over the years from working in various locations. I've always had a strong interest in botany and especially ethnobotany, or how plants that we have today were used in the past. I've got comments open if anyone would like to type in and just say, hello, I'm here. I definitely look forward to hearing from each and every one of you tonight. As we go along, I will try to answer any questions that I can. And if there are questions posted after the completion of the program this evening, I will be back on Facebook to check those comments and questions as well. Here's a little piece of trivia for those of you who might be listening already. Can anyone name the plant that's in the background image to the intro slide, Plant Folklore? If you can see the image of the plant behind it and you type in your response, that would be great. A little story, a little background information. The first time I ever learned about native plants and what some of their specific uses were was a very long time ago when I was in an internship as a naturalist in a park. And I found it highly fascinating that the plants that we have growing right here around us have been utilized for so many different things. We've got about 3 minutes now before we kick off tonight's program, Plant Folklore. At the end of tonight's program, we will have the opportunity for Montgomery County residents to be entered into a book raffle, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we begin to conclude the program. But it's a really great book, and I find that whoever wins this book will find it such a treasure because the author really brings in the ability as a naturalist and as a writer to discuss the different plants in her book. And it's such a fluid read that it's a very simple read and you won't want to put it down. We've got a couple minutes now before we get started. Again, I'd like to welcome you to Plant Folklore this evening. My name is Steph Morissette, and it's my pleasure to bring this program to you on behalf of Crawfordsville District Public Library. All right, we just got a few more seconds and we're going to get started. I'm going to wait for 6 o'clock on the dot. It looks like we have Josh tuning in already this evening. Hi, Josh. Thanks for tuning in. Good to see that you're on here tonight. And we are officially going to go ahead and get started. Again, Plant Folklore. My name is Steph Morissette. I'm bringing this program to you on behalf of the Crawfordsville District Public Library. I'm an assistant in the Reference and Local History Department on the second floor at CDPL. Tonight, we are going to be discussing medicinal and culinary plants that were used by both Indigenous Americans as well as early Indiana pioneers. But as we get started here, I need to make the announcement that these plants we're going to be discussing tonight are for the most part not regulated by the FDA. And with that statement, this program is intended for identification purposes and historical uses only. So please consult an experienced botanist or even a medical practitioner before you ingest any wild plant parts, just so that you're playing it safe. Historically, plants have been prized for more than just their beauty. They've been used as extracts and spices, as well as different culinary dishes. But as people began to learn more about plants, they realized that these plants can be used as herbal remedies in treatments of various ailments. There was something called the Doctrine of Signatures, and it was actually a book that was written by a Dr. Bradley C. Bomer, and this was written in the 1700s. And what the Doctrine of Signatures described, it was actually an unsubstantiated belief that plants or certain parts that exhibit certain colors, odors, or shapes of human body parts could then heal that part of the body that was in question. However, as though this seems like just a really great idea, it was a lot of trial and error. And so there were a lot of consequences to some unknown plant problems that might come up with ingesting plant parts. However, with that said, many of the medicines that we use today have plant derivatives. So if we apply the doctrine of signatures to the types of medicines that early peoples used, here's a list of several of the different types of medicines that were created. So we'll go through this list here briefly. Tonics were anything from a tea, either hot or cold, but it's a solution that was given to drink for better health. And it could also be more than just tea. It could be really any roots of plants that you're going to use as a solution to drink to help for better health. A poultice is ground plant parts that are made into a paste, and then that paste or that poultice is applied to the affected area where there's an injury on the body, whether it's due to inflammation or simple soreness. The poultice actually draws out some of that inflammation and pain. While a wash, on the other hand, consisted of plant parts that were boiled, and then the plant parts were removed, and the wash that remained was used to clean wounds. Something similar is an astringent, and it's a topically applied liquid, and this comes about as a result of soaked plant parts. So once you remove the plant parts, you can apply the astringent or the wash to reduce bleeding or cleanse the skin and even tighten the pores. A tincture is an alcoholic-based drink used with fermented plant parts that are then strained and the liquid ingested. So these were really popular in the late 1800s and 1900s with the traveling doctor wagons that would go around. And finally, we have a decoction, which is simply boiling plant parts down into a concentrate and then ingesting it. So we'll be talking about various instances of each of these throughout the course of this program. Let's get started with our first plant. Toothwort, or crow's foot, as Native Americans called it. It's also known as pepperroot, but crow's foot, as the Native Americans called it, they named it that because of the shape of the leaves. So if you look at the upper right-hand image, you can see that those leaves can resemble bird footprints. Also known as pepperroot, it has a horseradishy pepper-like taste, so it could have been ground and used as a seasoning. But toothwort, the name toothwort comes from the fact that the roots of this plant resembled our canine teeth. And so it was thought through the doctrine of signatures that if you chewed on these roots, it would cure your toothaches. One final mention on the habitat of this particular plant. It is found in ephemeral woodlands, or ephemeral just means short-lived, and this is usually in the spring. So they're a short-lived spring plant. Bloodroot, also known as red root or Indian red paint, got its name from the red liquid that is released from any part of the plant when it's injured or damaged. This includes the leaves as well as the roots. So with this beautiful red color, it was used as a natural dye. And because of the red color, the doctrine of signatures also dictated that it should cure blood disorders. Interesting to note, bloodroot actually works as a natural bug repellent. And furthermore, you can use it as a topical or an oral bacterial agent because it has been shown that it can reduce dental plaque and gingivitis. For instance, I don't know if they still make this type of toothpaste or if it's already been set aside as a toothpaste of the past, but there was a red gel toothpaste called Close-Up, and it actually had derivatives of bloodroot in it to give it the red dye. This plant is found mostly in moist woodlands, and it grows rather low to the ground. You can see in the image there it has a distinctly scalloped leaf and a beautiful white flower. Hepatica, or liverwort. Liverwort gets its name from the tri-lobed leaves, how it has 3 lobes. This was thought, based on the doctrine of signatures, that it resembled the way that the human liver looked in its shape. Again, the doctrine of signatures would dictate that it would help alleviate liver problems, gallbladder issues, or even digestive disorders. So indigenous Americans or early pioneers would make decoctions from the leaves. So remember, a decoction is boiling down the plant parts into a concentrate and then consuming it. Liverwort can be found along creek bottoms or in moist woods pretty much throughout the spring, and just it's a beautiful plant with that purple flower. You just can't miss it. It's so striking. The mayapple, or the mandrake root, has several interesting names. First of all, let's mention the word mandrake. Well, mandrake root, if you can see in the lower left-hand image, the roots of the mayapple resemble the human body with arms and legs and even a small head. So this is how the mayapple got one of its names. The mayapple was also named for its yellow fruit that you can see in the upper right-hand image. And this plant was also nicknamed ground lemon. This plant was thought to treat not only constipation, but liver conditions, but it was also used to make jellies and flavored drinks. It is important to note that the mayapple should only be ingested in small quantities because at larger dosages, they're actually proven to be poisonous. So you really have to know what you're doing when you experiment with the mandrake root. This plant is common throughout the spring Midwest and the woodlands we have around here. Spicebush. Spicebush is an understory shrub that grows in open woodlands. It's named for its aromatic parts. This includes most of the tree, or excuse me, the shrub itself. The bark, the leaves, and the fruit have been used throughout time for different flavorings and even scent making, like soaps and whatnot. If the berries were dried and powdered, they could be used as an allspice substitute. And I will tell you that this entire plant has such a beautiful aromatic odor about it that it's just pleasing to the senses. You could also use the dried bark and rub it into a cinnamon substitute. Leaves were actually used in a tonic or a fever reducing tea. An extract or an oil could be used for rheumatic pain. And just a wealth of things that you can do with this incredibly versatile spice bush. Cattails. I'm pretty sure that we all know what the cattails are and probably even where they grow. But I'm not sure if we all know that cattails can be edible during the entire year. So young shoots can be eaten raw or cooked. The immature flower spike can be boiled and eaten like corn on the cob. I'd really like to see that. That's something that I have not tried. The roots or the rhizomes can be cooked like potatoes, and the roots after they've been cooked can actually be ground into a flour. And one thing I found fascinating about cattails is they have 10 times more starch than a potato. So this would be a good natural plant to utilize if we were in a foraging type situation. Moreover, the leaves can be woven into mats, and this plant is just very versatile. They live all around wetland areas, anywhere where there's bogs or swampiness, stagnant or standing water. Rob, looks like Rob tuned in. Hi, Rob. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're going to talk about fiddleheads now, Rob. Fiddleheads are fern fronds before they begin to unfurl. That sounded like a really long, fun phrase to say. Keep using those F's. So these little curled fiddleheads can be picked and cooked like asparagus and tossed in fresh salads. They lend a nutty woodland flavor, though I myself have not experienced it. I would definitely be willing to try it. Fiddleheads contain antioxidants, as well as being a good source of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. They're high in potassium, iron, and fiber. And ferns can be found in moist or damp, cool woodlands, anywhere where there's some partial to full shade. Stinging nettles. Stinging nettles are ones that we hear stories about, people walking into patches of stinging nettles. And they actually, if you look in the lower image, you see these little trichomes or stinging hairs that are along the stem and the leaves of the stinging nettle. These stingers actually release a histamine into the body, and so you get the allergic reaction of a stinging sensation as well as an itching sensation. However, if you want to eat stinging nettles, you can simply boil them and those trichomes or those hairs will actually dissolve and fall off. Then, once you've cooked your stinging nettles, just nettles now, minus the stingers, the young leaves can be eaten like collards. So you just make up your collards and eat them just like that. Nettle have been studied for remedies for arthritis, in addition, kidney and urinary tract infections. And you could make a tea or a tonic to help with allergies. Moreover, stinging nettles have been used in shampoo for dandruff control, and it even leaves your hair glossy and shiny when you're finished using the shampoo of the nettle. You can make young nettle beer. And remember when we talk about alcoholic drinks with plant parts, it becomes a tincture. Nettles are high in calcium, magnesium, iron, potassium, and B complex vitamins. They also grow in damp wooded areas, and they grow in usually in combination with our next plant here, jewelweed or the touch me not. The jewelweed is named for its little yellow or orange flower that they do resemble little jewels, especially when you have just a drop or two of dew on them in the early mornings. They're additionally called touch-me-nots because when the seed pods are touched, the seed pods explode open and the seeds burst forth. It's said that these little seed pods can be added to salads and lend a nutty flavor to your salad. Jewelweed's also used as a proponent for anti-inflammatories. It's an antihistamine, an antifungal, and even helps treat eczema and bug bites. But the important thing I want to stress here is that jewelweed is an antihistamine. Now, if we remember to the previous slide when we discussed stinging nettles and the trichomes, the little hairs that would release the histamines into the body, causing the stinging and itching sensation, the jewelweed provides the antidote to the stinging nettles. And that's because the stem or the juices within the stem of the, the jewelweed actually has an aloe type property that will treat not only stinging nettles and remove the sting from them if you apply it to the area that's affected, but it will also help alleviate the itch of poison ivy. So it's really an important plant if you're in the woods and you run into some poison ivy or you run into a patch of stinging nettles. You should be able to find jewelweed close by and topically apply the the inside of the stem juice to your rash and you'll be good to go. Again, these plants grow in conjunction with one another near damp woods and bottomlands, and they really just literally go hand in hand. Lady slippers. I remember the first time I ever saw a lady slipper. It was a pink lady slipper, and it was at Turkey Run State Park. And I found it the most beautiful wildflower I had ever seen, and to this day it remains one of them. The lady slipper is a member of the orchid family, and the roots have been used to create a tonic, a nerve tonic specifically, which acted as a sedative, and it also helped treat anxiety and depression. It also helped with headaches and muscle spasms. So it kind of just really overall helped calm you down. The interesting thing about lady slippers, even though it's a member of the orchid family, it can grow anywhere between moist to dry woodlands, even along river bottoms. And I've actually even seen lady slippers growing on disturbed sides of the roads. So it can kind of be surprising where you might find them. It's important to note here that the lady slipper, if you ingest too much, can cause a psychedelic reaction, and that wouldn't be good. So this again is why these plants have not been approved by the FDA, and that it's important to have an experienced botanist with you if you're looking at any of these wild plants. Coneflowers, most of us are familiar with the purple coneflower, cornflower as indigenous Americans called them. They grow really about anywhere from flower beds to prairies and grasslands. They really like full sun. But the medicinal uses of the coneflower included its use as a blood purifier as well as a digestive stimulant. There are so many ways to prepare different methods of the coneflower that we could have a list that goes on and on. But just a few of those here, just a couple of them. It was used as an antiseptic wash. Teas or tonics have also been used to reduce infection and help stimulate the immune system. And through that, it will also help shorten fevers. Coneflower is one of my favorite flowers. There's so many varieties. Elderberry. Many of us are familiar with elderberry. Elderberry is known as the medicine chest for the people. The berries, and these have been studied. The elderberry has been extensively studied, and the berries contain antioxidants. The elderberry supports a strong immune system and respiratory system as well. A lot of people use it today as a cure-all, as I'm sure many of you know, at the farmers market here in town. We do have someone who does sell elderberry products, and they are very popular. Elderberry can be used as a tonic, such as we mentioned in a tea. It can be made into wine or a tincture, as we know alcoholic beverages with plant parts are called. A syrup, which is a decoction, it's the boiling down into a concentrate. Even jams, elderberry jam. And just as an overall dietary supplement. The elderberry wash has actually even been used to help improve skin quality. Now, I haven't tried that myself, so I can't vouch for it, but I do know that elderberry in itself stains the properties of the color in the elderberry will actually stain your fingers and your clothing. So I'm not sure if I'd want to use a wash or not, but the overall proven benefits of elderberry simply cannot be denied. And finally, elderberry grows really in sunny locations with wet or dry soils. It's very versatile. We've just got a few more plants here to discuss. And one of the next three we're going to talk about is wild ginseng or American ginseng. American ginseng is used by mostly by Native Americans in ceremonies, but it's federally protected due to overhunting. It's only allowed in about 19 states right now, and that's because of the high illegal harvesting, and the demand is so high for it that people will um, dig it illegally. It's mostly exported, believe it or not, over to the Asia area and the countries over that way. However, here we use American ginseng in energy drinks. We have it in herbal teas, and some people even take it as a dietary supplement. It's been shown to boost male hormones. It's been shown to increase brain functioning and even to lower blood sugar. And ginseng can be found in deciduous forests throughout the eastern United States, particularly in the Appalachian Mountains. Wild ginger, on the other hand, grows very close to the ground and has distinctive heart-shaped leaves with stalks that have fine white hairs on them. There are flowers that grow very close to the ground with 3 maroon flower petals. These flower petals actually, excuse me, the flower itself uh, gives off a rancid or a putrid odor to attract pollinators that are close to the ground. This would include flies, beetles, and ants. Ginger, just as we know, the spice ginger has been used as a cooking spice over multiple generations, so this would be an extract. If we soaked the roots, we could actually make a ginger type ale, which would be a tonic. We could candy the roots and eat them for enjoyment. We could even boil it down to make syrup, which would be a decoction. So all these things are following along in the Doctrine of Signatures. It has antibiotic properties, so crushing this plant and applying it as a paste on wounds would prove to have antibiotic properties. The wild ginger grows around here, usually throughout the spring and sometimes into summer, depending on where you're at. I haven't really looked too far into summer to find wild ginger. However, it's very common right now in Indiana woodlands, and the distinctive heart-shaped leaf really gives away this as the wild ginger. Chicory. Chicory is known as the cowboy coffee. It's literally a roadside ditchweed, and the roots are ground and used as a coffee substitute. So chicory root, ground chicory root, has been known as a gastrointestinal reliever. It's also a diuretic. It can treat gallbladder and digestive issues as well, so it's pretty versatile too. It contains calcium and potassium as well as beta carotene. And you can find this weed sometimes, if you will. That's kind of a disrespectful word for plants, but you can find this plant literally growing along the roadsides as you drive down the road. Looks like we have another Joshua on here. Hi, Joshua. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're going to talk about scouring rush or horsetails now, Josh. Both Joshes looks like we'll talk about those. And this plant, the horsetail, was named for the tip of the plant that resembled a horse's tail. If you look in the lower image, you can see how that spike might resemble a horse's tail. I really like this plant because it has hollow stems that if you crush them, you can actually use them to scour your cast iron pots and pans. So if you're camping, you happen to find some of this plant growing nearby, you can use it to scour out your plants. And I've actually used it before on a small camping expedition. I was highly impressed. So the stems themselves actually contain tiny black teeth, if you will. And in the upper right-hand image, you can see some of those teeth in the center of one of the stalks. They're actually scale-like leaves that are very abrasive, hence why they can be used to clean your cookware. This is an evergreen plant that contains silica, so you definitely, even though you can eat it, you don't want to eat it raw because it might tear up the enamel on your teeth. Horsetails grow near wet areas or places where there's the water table closest to the ground. These plants are a good source of starch and will treat kidney and gallbladder problems as well as UTIs. Used topically, it has an antimicrobial property and really helps with wound healing. One of my favorites, anise root, also known as sweet Sicily or sweet root. This is in the carrot, parsnip, fennel family. It has bluish black stems with a very fine pubescence or a very fine white fuzz down the stem. Native Americans would use it as a poultice and even drink tonics to cure muscle spasms. It helps with indigestion and apparently even helps with toothaches. This plant contains fiber, vitamin C, and even B6 complex, and it can be shown to support heart health. Mostly it's used as a sweetener and a fragrance. You can chew on the root for a sweet treat, and I have done this, but be sure you want to wash your root off very well first. And chewing on the root gives the semblance of flavor of black licorice. So if you can positively identify anise root or sweet Sicily in the woods and want to just try chewing on that totally organic black licorice, then anise root is for you. And finally, the last plant we're going to talk about this evening is milkweed. The milkweed is named for the milky sap that's exuded when any part of the plant is damaged. Indigenous Americans gave a tonic of this plant to women after birth to help stimulate milk production. And so you can see why the Doctrine of Signatures would state if it has a milky white sap, then perhaps it would help women produce milk. If it was applied topically, apparently it could cure warts. And it has been shown in studies that the roots, if they're chewed, can actually cure dysentery. It's also used to treat asthma and coughs. The seed tufts have multiple uses. They can be used as down for pillows, even as fire tinder. And the stringy white parts of the plant stem itself can be woven into cord. This plant grows pretty much everywhere too, from flower beds to grasslands to roadside ditches and fence rows. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about some of these native plants and what their wild historical and culinary uses were, as well as medicinal properties. If you'd like to know more about wild plant lore, I really encourage you to check out the United States uh, Department of Agriculture's plant database. It contains a wealth of information. Additionally, there's wild folklore at americanmeadows.com and garden superstitions at gardentherapy.ca/garden superstitions. Right here in our library on the second floor at CDPL in our nonfiction collections, we have a variety of books. These are just a few of our hardback books that I've listed here. The top one I want to discuss here for just a minute, Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Kimmerer, is a fairly new book. And Robin Kimmerer is an ethnobotanist. And so she weaves this book, Braiding Sweetgrass, from a naturalist point of view into her research on ethnobotany. So it's a really good, quick read. And the marriage of botany with the fluidity of the writing is just an incredible read. And so I'm pleased to announce that will be the book we will be giving away tonight in our raffle that's open to Montgomery County residents only. With that, I'd like to thank you for tuning in tonight. I hope that you maybe learned a little bit, but moreover had a lot of fun. And that's what we like our programs to be about. For those of you who would like to enter into the Montgomery County resident book raffle, please submit a question or comment to ask@cdpl.lib.in.us. And in the subject line, just put plant folklore. Those of you who submit questions or comments will be entered into that raffle to win Braiding Sweetgrass. Additionally, I would like to hear any feedback you have on tonight's program to the same email address. We really like to hear feedback on how our programming is going, what information you'd like to see that we haven't presented yet, and just an overall satisfaction of the programming we offer. Without further ado, I really want to thank you all again for coming out tonight, and we will look towards our next program next month, June 17th, and that will be on common bees of Indiana. So we'll learn to do some bee identification and learn some of the different types of bees we have here in Indiana. Again, thank you and good night. And thank you, Kaylee, for tuning in. Thanks for saying it was very interesting. Appreciate that. You all have a wonderful evening. Good night.